My name is Caleb. I've spent the better part of 40 years as a general contractor. I know how to fix things that are broken, and I know when something is too far gone to be salvaged. For 5 years, I thought my marriage to Naomi was the one thing in my life that didn't need a repair crew. I worked 10-hour shifts, paid the mortgage, handled the insurance, and made sure she had every self-care luxury she asked for. I thought I was being a good provider. I thought we were a team. But on a humid Saturday night at 11:47 p.m., the floor fell out from under me. I was out in the workshop, finishing a custom oak desk for a client. My phone buzzed on the workbench. It was a voicemail icon from Naomi. Now, Naomi was upstairs in the house, presumably asleep. I figured she'd misclicked or maybe pocket-dialed me while she was tossing in her sleep. I wiped the sawdust off my hands and hit play, expecting to hear the sound of a rustling pillow or a mundane reminder about the grocery list. What I heard instead was a breathless, hushed whisper that made my stomach turn into a block of ice. The way he pulled me into that back storage room, Tash. I haven't stopped thinking about it. His hands, his mouth. I swear I almost lost it right there. The message cut off abruptly. She'd realized her mistake mid-sentence. She'd meant to send that to her bestie Tasha, the ringleader of her little fitness circle. Instead, she'd sent the smoking gun directly to the man who paid her bills. 2 minutes later, the workshop door creaked open. Naomi stood there in those silk pajamas I'd bought her for our 5th anniversary last month. Her green eyes were scanning my face like a security camera, looking for any tell that I'd heard it. "Hey babe," she said, her voice artificially casual. "Coming to bed soon?" I looked at her, really looked at her, and for the first time I didn't see my wife. I saw a stranger. A high-maintenance stranger who was playing me for a fool. I forced a smile, the kind I use with difficult building inspectors. "Just finishing up this drawer slide, Naomi. 5 more minutes. Everything okay? You look tense. Long day." "Fine," I said. "Just work. Go on up. I'll be there." As soon as her footsteps faded, I sat down in my old workshop chair and felt the fury start to simmer. She called me predictable. She told her friend I was sweet but boring, while she was getting revived by some punk in a storage room. I pulled up her contact info and saw the message was already deleted from her end. She thought she was safe. She thought the old man was too slow to catch on. She was wrong. The next morning I kissed her goodbye like I always do. She was heading to her 9 a.m. class at Elmwood Bar in Bloom, that boutique fitness studio that cost me $300 a month. "I might grab coffee after," she said, adjusting her designer leggings. "Tasha wants to debrief about the weekend." I waited 5 minutes, then I got in my truck and followed her at a distance. I didn't go to the job site. I parked across the street from the studio with a clear view of the entrance. Around 10:15 the squad emerged. Naomi, Tasha, Ivy, and Brenda. All perfectly coiffed, all carrying those expensive designer water bottles. They walked 2 blocks to grind coffee. Through the window, I watched Naomi light up like a Christmas tree as a dark-haired kid behind the counter smiled at her. This was Mason, the barista. A guy who probably hasn't even paid off his first car, and my wife was looking at him like he was the second coming. I watched Tasha and the others whisper and giggle, shooting knowing looks at each other. This wasn't just Naomi's mistake. This was an organized effort. I went home and did something I never thought I'd have to do. I logged into our shared cloud account and cloned her phone's backup. I'm a contractor, not a hacker, but it doesn't take a genius to find a folder labeled Fitness Journey that's protected by a secondary password. I bypassed it in 10 minutes. Inside was the real journey. Thousands of messages in a group chat called Bar Babes. "Tasha, Richard thinks I'm training for a marathon. Meanwhile, the CrossFit trainer is giving me a very different kind of workout. My legs are like jelly, girls." "Ivy, David is so obsessed with his firm that he doesn't even notice I'm at the Ivy Hotel 3 nights a week. He actually thanked me for being so independent lately." "Brenda, Marcus is just happy I'm glowing from yoga. If he knew Jake the instructor was the reason for the glow, he'd probably want a refund." "Naomi, Caleb is such a rock. He's so predictable that I told him I'm doing a spa retreat next weekend in Portland. He already cleared the joint account for me. Mason is so excited." I sat there in the dark office, reading page after page of this garbage. These women weren't just cheating, they were celebrating it. They called it self-care and empowerment. They convinced themselves that lying to the men who provided for them was a form of personal growth. They used each other as alibis, coordinated their affair schedules, and laughed at us behind our backs. Tasha sent a voice note that made my blood boil. "Girls, we aren't cheating. We're taking back our lives. Our husbands are lucky we stay with them at all. This is our time to be dangerous. Dangerous. I thought. You want to see dangerous? Watch what happens when a man who builds things for a living decides it's time for a total demolition. I started my own file, Operation Barbecue. For the next 2 weeks I played the part. I was this sweet, predictable husband. I even bought Naomi a new set of workout gear. I acted like I didn't have a care in the world while I was gathering every piece of evidence. I hired a private investigator to get the photos of Naomi in Portland with the barista. I got the credit card statements showing she spent $847 of my hard-earned money on a hotel room for her lover. I got the GPS logs from her car. Then I delivered the invitations. I went to each husband's office personally. Richard the accountant, David the developer, Marcus the business owner. Good men. Hard-working men. I told them, I'm throwing a small barbecue this Saturday. It's been a while since we all got together. Naomi and the girls are always together, it's time we husbands caught up. They were all in. Richard even offered to bring the wine. Saturday morning I was up at dawn. I power washed the deck, set up the string lights and prepped the finest ribs money could buy. I also set up a massive outdoor projector screen against the fence. What's the screen for, honey? Naomi asked, looking nervous as she saw me testing the speakers. Oh, just a little surprise, I said, smiling. A tribute to our community and our journey here in Brookage. By 6 p.m. everyone was there. The sun was setting, the beer was cold, and the bar babes were sitting together, sipping lattes and wine, looking like the pictures of suburban perfection. They were whispering, probably checking their phones to see if their lovers had texted. Richard, David, and Marcus were laughing, enjoying a rare break from their high-stress jobs. I want to make a toast, I said, standing up and holding my beer. The yard went quiet. To trust. To the women who keep our homes while we work. To the secrets that keep a marriage interesting. The wives laughed, thinking I was being charming. The husbands raised their glasses. And now, I said, a little look at what our wives have been up to while we weren't looking. I hit the play button on my remote. The first thing that hit the screen wasn't a photo of the neighborhood. It was the screenshot of the Bar Babes group chat. Naomi's message about me being predictable and boring flashed in letters 3 feet high. The silence that followed was deafening. Then came the photos. Tasha in the arms of the CrossFit trainer. Ivy entering the hotel with her art instructor. Brenda at the yoga studio after hours. And finally, Naomi and Mason in Portland, kissing on the balcony of the room I paid for. I didn't stop there. I played the audio recording of Tasha's self-care manifesto. The yard erupted. Richard stood up so fast he knocked his chair over. Tasha? What is this? A marathon? You said you were running a marathon. David was staring at the screen, his face turning a dangerous shade of red. The Ivy Hotel? 3 nights a week, Ivy? You told me you were at the firm's charity events. Marcus didn't say anything. He just looked at Brenda, who was trying to hide her face behind her hands. Naomi lunged for the projector, screaming, Caleb, turn it off. You're insane. You're violating our privacy. Privacy? I laughed and it felt good. You used our joint account to pay for a hotel with a kid who can't even shave yet. You used my money to finance your self-discovery. There is no privacy when you're spending my paycheck on another man. I reached into my pocket and pulled out 4 flash drives. I handed one to Richard, one to David, and one to Marcus. Everything is on here, guys. The texts, the GPS logs, the hotel receipts, the photos. I've already talked to Catherine Webb, she's the best divorce attorney in the state. She's expecting your calls. The husbands didn't wait. Richard grabbed Tasha by the arm and marched her to the car. David was already on the phone with his lawyer before he even hit the driveway. Marcus just walked out, leaving Brenda sobbing on the deck. Finally, it was just me and Naomi. I want a divorce, I said quietly. Caleb, please. Was a mistake. The girls, they influenced me. We can go to counseling. You didn't slip and fall into a hotel room in Portland, Naomi. You planned it. You documented it. You laughed about it. She tried one last move. A week later, after she'd been served the papers, she showed up at my door. She looked like hell. She told me she was pregnant. She tried to tell me it was mine. I looked her right in the eye and did something I'd been waiting to do for months. I started to laugh. It's yours, Caleb. I swear. We can be a family again. That's real interesting, Naomi, I said, leaning against the doorframe. Because I had a vasectomy 8 months ago. I've got the medical records right here on my phone if you want to see them. The color drained from her face so fast I thought she might faint. So, I continued. Is it Mason's? Or one of the others? Not that it matters. You're not my problem anymore. I shut the door. I didn't slam it. I just closed it like I was sealing off a room with too much rot to save. 3 weeks later, the divorces were all finalized. I kept the house. I kept the business. Naomi moved out of state, broke and alone, because word of those screenshots made sure no one in this town would ever hire her or trust her again. I sat out on my deck last night, the one I built with my own 2 hands. The air was clear. The joints were tight. And for the first time in 5 years, the foundation was solid. Because sometimes, you have to tear the whole damn thing down to find out what's actually worth building. The week after the barbecue, my house felt different. It was quiet, not the peaceful kind of quiet, but the hollow kind you feel after a storm has ripped the roof off. Naomi was staying at a cheap motel on the edge of town. She tried calling me 50 times a day, but I'd already blocked her. I had a job to do, and as any contractor will tell you, you don't talk to the client while the building is being leveled. On Monday morning, I sat in the office of Catherine Webb. She was a silver-haired shark who'd been through more divorces than a Vegas chapel. She was looking through the flash drive I'd put together. Caleb, she said, pulling her glasses down her nose. In 30 years of family law, I've never seen a man do his own discovery, judicial investigation, this thoroughly. You didn't just catch her, you documented a criminal enterprise of the heart. I just wanted the facts, Catherine, I told her. I don't care about the drama. I just want my life back. Well, she leaned back, you've given me enough ammunition to sink a battleship. Especially these joint account statements. She wasn't just cheating, she was using marital funds to finance her affairs. In this state, that's called dissipation of assets. We're going to claw back every dime she spent on that barista. While Catherine was sharpening her knives, the rest of the town was imploding. The bar babes weren't just a secret club anymore. They were the main attraction of the local gossip mill. Someone, and I have my suspicions it was David the developer, had leaked screenshots of the group chat to the local Facebook community groups. The fallout was instant. Elmwood Bar and Bloom, that fancy studio they all treated like a church, lost half its members in 48 hours. Nobody wanted to be associated with a place that looked like a breeding ground for adultery. Mason the barista? He was fired from Grind Coffee before the sun went down on Monday. Turns out, the owner didn't appreciate his shop being used as a pickup joint for bored wives. I ran into Richard, the accountant, at the hardware store on Wednesday. He looked 10 years older. She's gone, Caleb, he said, his voice sounding like gravel. Tasha tried to say it was all a joke. A game. But then I saw the text she sent about our kids, how I was too distracted by work to notice she was gone. I'm filing for full custody. I shook his hand. Stay strong, Richard. The truth is a bitter pill, but it cures the rot. The discovery phase of the divorce was where it got really ugly. Naomi's lawyer, a young guy who looked like he'd never seen a day of hard labor in his life, tried to play the emotional neglect card. Your Honor, the lawyer argued in a preliminary hearing, my client was driven to seek companionship elsewhere because Mr. Marsh was possessive and controlling. His surveillance of her movements constitutes harassment. Catherine didn't even stand up. She just tapped a folder. Your Honor, if being a controlling husband means paying for a $300 a month fitness membership, a designer wardrobe, and a luxury SUV that you then use to drive to a hotel in Portland, all on Mr. Marsh's dime, then every woman in this state should be so lucky. We have the receipts. We have the GPS logs from the vehicle he owns. We have the credit card charges for the room he paid for. The judge, a man about my age who looked like he didn't have time for games, glanced at the photos of Naomi and Mason. He looked at Naomi, who was sitting there trying to look like a victim in a black dress that probably cost me a week's pay. Counselor, the judge said to Naomi's lawyer, in this courtroom we call this consequences. Motion denied. But the real cherry on top was the mediation. We were sitting across a mahogany table. Naomi looked thin, her eyes were hollow. She'd realized that her squad, Tasha, Ivy, and Brenda, had all turned on each other. Ivy was suing Tasha for encouraging her affairs to cover her own tracks. They were eating each other alive. I just want a settlement, Caleb, Naomi whispered. I deserve something for 5 years of my life. You got 5 years of a free ride, Naomi, I said. You got a house, a career you didn't have to work for, and a husband who trusted you. You threw it all away for a guy who makes $4 an hour plus tips. Catherine slid the final papers across the table. Here's the deal. Caleb keeps the house. He keeps the business. He keeps the retirement accounts. You keep your car, but you take over the payments starting tomorrow. And you will reimburse the marital estate for the $12,000 we've identified as spent on your extracurricular activities. Naomi's lawyer gasped. That's a total wipeout. It's a fair price for a total demolition, I added. Naomi sighed. She had no choice. The evidence was too loud to ignore. A week after the papers were stamped, that's when she showed up at my door with the pregnancy stunt. Like I told you, I gave her the news about my vasectomy. That was the final nail in the coffin. The look on her face wasn't just heartbreak, it was the realization that she was officially 100% on her own with a kid that wasn't mine and a lover who had skipped town the moment things got real. I heard later she went through with a clinic appointment out of state. She couldn't afford a kid and Mason wasn't answering her calls. She moved back in with her parents in some small town 3 states away. The bar babe was now a broke waitress at a diner, or so the rumors said. As for me, I went back to work. I sat out on my porch last night. I'd finished a new set of stairs for the back deck. Everything was level. Everything was solid. I looked out over the yard and felt peace. No more wondering where she was. No more checking the joint account for Target runs that were actually hotel stays. I'm a contractor. I know that sometimes a building looks good on the outside, but the bones are bad. And when the bones are bad, there's only one thing to do. You tear it down, you clear the debris, and you start fresh on a foundation of truth. I'm 65 years old and I've got a lot of building left to do. But this time, I'm the only one with a key to the front door. It's been 6 months since I watched my life turn into a heap of scrap metal on that humid Saturday night barbecue. They say time heals all wounds, but in my 40 years as a contractor, I've learned that time just shows you which scars are permanent and which parts of the structure were too rotten to ever fix. My name is Caleb, and the heaviest weight I've ever hauled wasn't the lumber, the steel, or the concrete. It was the deafening, suffocating silence of a house that had been built on 5 years of systematic lies. When you spend your life building homes for people, you learn to spot a hairline crack in a foundation from 50 yards away. But when it's your own home, your own bedroom, your own wife, sometimes you look right past the damage because you're too busy paying the bills to notice the ground is shifting beneath your feet. The town of Brookage isn't the same place it was before that night. You see, when you pull a loose thread on a cheap sweater, the whole thing eventually unravels until there's nothing left but a pile of yarn. My Operation Barbecue didn't just end my marriage to Naomi, it acted like a high-grade explosive through the entire social fabric of this town. Those women, the self-proclaimed bar babes, thought they were untouchable. They thought their designer leggings, their luxury SUVs, and their self-care manifestos were a bulletproof vest that would protect them from ever having to face the music. They seriously believed that being empowered meant they had a blank check to betray the men who worked 10-hour shifts to fund their journeys. They were wrong. Dead wrong. The fallout was like a multi-car pileup on the interstate during a fog bank. Richard, the local accountant, didn't hold back for a single second. Once I handed him that flash drive in front of everyone, he didn't just file for divorce. He went after Tasha with a cold, calculated vengeance I didn't think a guy who spends his life looking at spreadsheets had in him. He moved her out of their 4-bedroom colonial and into a tiny, cramped studio apartment above a noisy laundromat on the edge of town within 7 days. Tasha, the woman who used to stand in my kitchen and lecture everyone on feminine energy and finding your truth, was suddenly spotted at the local discount grocery store, clutching coupons with shaking hands and looking like she hadn't slept since the Bush administration. The CrossFit trainer she was seeing behind Richard's back? Richard made sure the gym owner saw the videos. The kid got hit with a morality clause violation, lost his certification, and was banned from every high-end gym in the county. Last I heard, he was hauling junk for a cut-rate moving company, smelling like old garbage instead of expensive cologne. David, the real estate developer, was even colder. He's a guy who knows how to play the long game. He used his business connections to make absolutely sure Ivy couldn't find a job in any professional firm within a 50-mile radius. He invoked the infidelity clause in their prenup so aggressively that Ivy left their mansion with nothing but her personal clothes and a used sedan that had a dent in the door. But the real kicker? The Ivy Hotel, where she used to spend her nights with her art instructor? David found out the building was up for sale, bought it through one of his shell companies, and turned it into a low-income housing project just to spite her. Every time she drives past that place on her way to her shift at the mall, she's reminded of the exact night her art classes turned into a total financial wipeout. She thought she was playing a game of chess. She didn't realize David owned the board. Then there was the tragedy of Marcus and Brenda. Marcus was a quiet guy, a business owner who truly deeply loved his wife. When the truth about Yoga Jake came out on that projector screen, Marcus didn't scream or throw a fit. He just got very, very quiet. He packed his bags that same night, took the kids, and moved to a house on the coast that Brenda didn't even know he owned. Brenda tried to fight for custody in the local courts, but the judge took one look at the group chat logs I provided. Specifically, the parts where Brenda talked about how annoying it was to have to play the role of happy mom, while she'd rather be at the yoga studio, exploring her boundaries. The judge didn't find her boundaries very compelling. He granted Marcus primary custody and limited her visitation to supervised weekends. Brenda is still here in town, but she's a ghost. People literally cross the street when they see her coming. In a small town like Brookage, your reputation is the only currency that actually matters, and Brenda found herself flat broke and morally bankrupt in a matter of hours. My own legal battle with Naomi was a marathon of its own. Just when I thought the dust had settled and the papers were signed, she tried one last desperate Hail Mary play. Her attorney, a kid who looked like he'd never spent a day in the sun and probably thought hard work was an app on his phone, filed a motion to reopen the asset division. They had the audacity to claim that since I had hidden the fact of my vasectomy, I had defrauded her of her biological right to a family. They tried to argue that the entire divorce settlement should be voided because I hadn't been transparent about my medical history. Catherine Webb, my attorney and a woman who has the heart of a timber wolf, actually laughed out loud when she called me with the news. "Caleb, they are absolutely desperate," Catherine told me, her voice crackling with amusement. "They're trying to sue you for reproductive coercion. But they forgot one very important thing. We have the receipts." We went back to court and Catherine laid it all out. She produced emails from Naomi to her mother from 3 years prior where Naomi explicitly stated she never wanted children and was relieved that I felt the same way. We also had the testimony from the clinic where Naomi had gone to handle her situation with the barista. Catherine looked the judge in the eye and said, "Your Honor, the only coercion going on here is the defendant trying to coerce Mr. Marsh's bank account into a second payout for a lifestyle she destroyed with her own hands." The judge didn't even take 5 minutes to deliberate. He dismissed the motion with prejudice and ordered Naomi to pay every cent of my legal fees for the frivolous and insulting attempt to weaponize the legal system. When that gavel hit the wood, it sounded like the final nail in a coffin. The demolition was complete. The site was finally cleared of the rot. Elmwood Bar and Bloom, the sacred temple of the bar babes, shut its doors 2 months ago. The owner tried to rebrand it as a holistic wellness center, but the stink of the scandal followed it like a bad smell in a basement. No one wanted to be seen going in there. It's a nail salon now run by people who actually work for a living. And Mason? The dark-haired kid with the coffee beans and the wandering hands? He's long gone. I heard he moved back to Seattle to live in his parents' basement because he couldn't afford rent once he lost his tips. He didn't want anything to do with Naomi or the child she claimed was mine. That was the funniest part about the bar babes. They actually convinced themselves that these young guys loved them for their souls. They didn't realize they were just the afternoon entertainment for guys who had nothing to lose and nowhere else to be. I ran into Tasha at the hardware store about a week ago. It was the first time we'd been in the same room since that night on the deck. She was in the clearance aisle looking at discount paint, her hair messy and her clothes looking like they came from a thrift store. She saw me and her face turned a deep, ugly shade of red. "You destroyed us, Caleb," she hissed, her voice shaking with a mix of rage and shame. "You could have just divorced her quietly. You didn't have to humiliate us. You ruined 4 families because your ego was hurt." I set my box of galvanized nails down and looked her straight in the eyes. I didn't feel any anger and I didn't feel any triumph. I just felt a deep sense of pity for someone who still couldn't see the truth. "Tasha," I said, my voice as steady as a plumb line, "I didn't destroy anything. I just turned on a light in a room where you were doing things you were ashamed of. If the truth ruined your life, then your life was built on a lie. And in my business, if you build a house on a lie, you don't get to act surprised when the roof caves in. You built the ruin, I just showed the world the blueprints." She didn't say another word. She just turned her cart and hurried away, her cheap heels clicking on the concrete floor. A far cry from the $300 boots she used to wear when she was spending Richard's money. As for my own life, I've gone back to the basics. I sold that big hollow house in the suburbs. It was too big, it required too much maintenance, and it smelled too much like expensive perfume and cheap excuses. I bought an old farmhouse about 10 miles out of town, a real fixer-upper with a solid foundation and good bones. There's no HOA telling me what color my mailbox has to be, no nosy neighbors watching my every move, and most importantly, no fitness studios within earshot. I spend my days doing the work myself. I'm stripping the floors down to the original heart pine, refinishing the cabinets and fixing the rafters. There's a profound kind of healing that comes from working with your hands, from seeing a tangible, honest result at the end of a 10-hour day. Wood doesn't lie to you. Steel doesn't have a secret blend P. If you treat the materials with respect, they stay true to you. I've even started seeing someone new, a woman named Martha. She's a head nurse at the local clinic, a woman who has seen the real world, the blood and the guts of it, and doesn't need self-care or empowerment to feel like she has a purpose. We go fishing on the lake on Sundays. We talk about real things, the garden, the upcoming winter, our kids from our previous lives. There are no hidden folders on our phones, no bar babes, group chats, and absolutely zero drama. Just peace. Just a quiet life built on mutual respect and a shared understanding of what it means to be a grown-up. Every now and then I'll be sitting out on my new porch, watching the sun dip below the ridge and paint the sky in colors you can't buy in a paint store. I'll think back to that Saturday night at the barbecue. I'll think about the look on Naomi's face when the projector screen flickered to life and her world started to burn. I don't feel a surge of triumph anymore. I don't feel vindicated. I just feel relieved. I survived the collapse. I cleared away the debris. And I found out that even at 65 years old, I'm still a pretty damn good builder. Because the most important project I ever finished wasn't a house, a deck, or a custom desk. It was the total demolition of a massive, systematic lie that was poisoning my soul. And the foundation I'm standing on now? It's solid as a rock, built on the truth, and it's finally truly mine. And that's the only self-care a man like me ever really needed. No more questions, no more doubts. Just the quiet sound of a hammer hitting a nail, and the peace of knowing exactly where I stand.